Law. By Charles Hoyfort. Part 1 Chapter 6b. In Law Nature, September 25, 1880. Professor J. Brun of the University of Geneva writes that, near Jebel Sekra, Morocco, he had heard rumors of a fall of blood from the sky. He visited the place of the reported phenomenon. He says that, to his stupefaction, he found rocks and vegetation covered with scales of the red, shining material. Examining specimens under a microscope, he found them composed of minute organisms, which he tells us were Protococcus fluvialis. The identification may be doubted. I don't like it. The ease with which any writer can pick to pieces any statement made by anybody who is not present to bandy delusions with him is becoming tiresome. But if I will write a book, I will write it triumphantly. So this identification may be doubted. First, we note that Professor Brun says that, instead of having the features of the algae that he had named, these organisms were simple, or undifferentiated. To explain this appearance, the professor, who had perhaps recovered from his stupefaction, says that the things were young ones. But an aggregation exclusively of young protococci is as extraordinary as would be a vast assemblage, say filling Central Park, New York, of human infants, without a sign of a parent. The explanation sublimates segregationism. It attributes to a grab an exquisite discrimination. Somewhere in a swamp, said Professor Brun, there were hosts of protococci, venerable ones, middle-aged ones, and their brats, or all sizes, as he worded it. Along came a whirlwind, carrying away all the minute organisms. This big rough disturbance removed with microscopic fastidiousness old protococci from young protococci, according to differences in specific gravity. It cast down at one place all the bereft parents, and precipitated, at Jebel Sekra, a rain of little, red orphans. When we recover from the sadness into which this tragedy cast us, we reflect that of all organisms, red blood cells are of the simplest, or least differentiated. Anyway, here is an orthodox scientist who accepted that red fluid did fall from the sky. I have about a dozen other records of showers of red fluids that were not rains colored by dusts. Upon several of these occasions the substance was identified as blood, or that once upon a time, or once upon an archaic time, there came to this earth, along arterial paths in space, red flows of a primitive plasm that deluged continents, and out of which, by the plan, purpose, guidance, or design that governs developments in all organisms, higher forms of life developed. And that maybe this mechanism has not altogether ceased, so that to this day, but in a vestigial sense, or in a very much dwindled representation, such flows are continuing, and that, if human beings ever have had agency in directing such flows, that is only a specialization of the general. Once upon a time, it was the fashion with those of us who say that they are of the enlightened, to reject all stories of the miracles at Lourdes. The doctors had much to do with this rejection. Somewhere behind everything that everybody believes, or disbelieves, is somebody's pocket. But now, as to those miracles, the explanation of autosuggestion is popular. Some of us who were not interested are beginning to think. The tendency that I point out is that of so often rejecting both data and an explanation, simply because one rejects an explanation. Many of our data are in this position of phenomena at Lourdes. Explanations have been taken over by theologians, or by spiritualists, and scientists, instead of opposing this usurpation, have denied the data. Whether it is only because I now want so to accept, or not, I now accept that the phenomenon of the stigmata, or flows of blood from points upon living images, has occurred.